Welcome, grab a popcorn, relax, you will enjoy this story, and please do not forget to subscribe to this channel.
The auditorium was already glowing before the music even began. Crystal lights poured down from the ceiling in soft gold. Cameras moved quietly between rows of well-dressed guests. Men in expensive suits sat beside women wrapped in silk, diamonds, and confidence. On the giant screens hanging on both sides of the stage, the live stream count kept climbing. Millions of people were watching from their phones, their living rooms, their offices, their hospital beds. Everything about the night had been carefully prepared to look important. At the center of it all stood Sonia Bello. She was the kind of woman who knew exactly what lighting did to her face and exactly how long to pause before speaking. Her silver gown held the light in a way that made her seem brighter than everyone else. Her makeup was flawless. Her smile was polished. Her voice, when she thanked the audience for supporting the charity gala, sounded warm enough to make strangers believe she cared deeply about every suffering person whose picture had appeared on the giant screen behind her. And the crowd loved her. They clapped at every word. They leaned forward when she spoke. They looked at her the way people look at stars they have decided are untouchable. Near the back of the auditorium, half hidden behind a side curtain and a stack of equipment cases, Amara Okeki stood still with a cleaning cloth in one hand. She had finished wiping down the stage edge barely 10 minutes earlier. She was still in her work uniform. The plain dark dress hung simply on her tired frame, and the yellow rubber gloves on her hands looked painfully out of place in a room full of polished people. There was a cleaning trolley not far behind her. She had only paused for a moment, intending to leave quietly before the next performance began. But then Sonia Bello's eyes found her. It happened so suddenly that at first, Amara thought she was mistaken. Sonia stopped in the middle of her elegant speech, turned her head slightly, and looked straight toward the back. Her smile remained in place. Her eyes did not. "You there?" Sonia said, lifting one manicured hand toward the shadows. "The woman in the cleaner's uniform. Come forward." The room changed at once. Conversations died. Heads turned. Cameras followed the direction of Sonia's hand. Even those watching online were suddenly pulled into the moment because the camera zoomed in, searching, finding. Amara felt the blood drain from her face. For 1 second she hoped Sonia was calling someone else, but there was no one else standing there in rubber gloves with a cloth in her hand. A ripple of curiosity passed through the hall. Amara swallowed and took a small step forward. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said softly. "I was just leaving. I didn't mean to." "Just come here," Sonia cut in, her voice sweet in the way sugar can hide poison. "Don't stand there like a frightened child." A few people laughed. Not many, but enough. Amara's fingers tightened around the cloth. She could feel every eye in the room pressing against her skin. She had spent years learning how to move unnoticed inside places like this. Clean the glass, wipe the floor, pick up what others drop. Keep your head down. Leave no trace except neatness behind you. That was how people like her survived humiliation. Quietly. But there was nothing quiet about the way Sonia was looking at her now. Amara began walking toward the front, each step feeling heavier than the last. The stage lights grew hotter as she came closer. The audience was no longer looking at Sonia. They were looking at her gloves, in her plain uniform, at the cloth in her hand like proof that she had entered the wrong world by mistake. She stopped at the edge of the stage. Sonia looked down at her with a smile too soft to be kind. "Come up," she said. Amara hesitated. That was enough to irritate Sonia. Before anyone could fully understand what was happening, Sonia stepped forward, bent down, caught Amara by the arm, and pulled her up onto the stage herself. A few shocked gasps broke out in the room. Amara nearly lost her balance. The bright light hit her eyes so hard that for a second the whole hall blurred. The applause had stopped. The music had stopped. Even the air seemed to wait. Sonia turned her neatly toward the crowd as though presenting something strange she had discovered backstage. "There," Sonia said lightly. "Now everyone can see her." Some people shifted in discomfort. Others were curious. A few smiled, expecting entertainment. Amara tried to pull her arm away gently, but Sonia's grip tightened for a brief moment before she released her. Up close, Sonia smelled expensive. Not like perfume alone, but like the kind of life that never had to beg, never had to choose between medicine and food, never had to smile through exhaustion because rent was waiting. Sonia turned to the band and snapped her fingers. "Get ready for Rise Again." At once, the musicians glanced at one another. It was not yet the point in the program when that song was supposed to happen. Still, nobody argued. They adjusted quickly, hands moving into place. The keyboardist straightened. The guitarist stepped closer to his microphone. The drummer rolled his shoulders and prepared. Amara's heart began to beat harder. She knew that song. Everybody knew that song. It was the song that had made Sonia Bello seem larger than life. The one with the final praise lift people spoke about in awe. The one critics had called untouchable. The one fans believed only Sonia could sing the way it deserved to be sung. The one song Amara had never planned to stand near tonight. Sonia smiled toward the audience again, all grace and control. "It seems," she said smoothly, "that our hard-working cleaner has been enjoying the show from very close range, so let us see whether she has any gift beyond mopping floors." This time, the laughter came more easily. Not from everyone, but enough. Amara's face burned. She wanted the floor to open and swallow her. She wanted the cameras to stop recording. She wanted to disappear into the same shadows from which Sonia had dragged her. Most of all, she wanted to leave before this turned into something worse. But deep inside, under the shame and the shock, another feeling had begun to rise. It was not fear. Not exactly. It was the cold, terrible understanding that Sonia had done this on purpose. Not because Amara was standing at the wrong place. Not because she was a cleaner. Not because Sonia wanted harmless fun. No. This was an attack. And Sonia only attacked when she felt threatened. Sonia took one graceful step closer, lifted her own microphone, and smiled for the cameras. Then, without dropping that smile, she leaned close enough for her lips to almost brush Amara's ear. When she spoke, her voice changed. The softness vanished, the sweetness disappeared. What remained was sharp, hard, and full of warning. "Fail quietly, girl." Amara froze. The words were low, but not low enough. Sonia had forgotten, or perhaps not cared, that Amara's microphone was already live. A strange hush moved across the auditorium. People had heard. Not everybody clearly, but enough to feel that something had shifted. Sonia pulled back at once, wearing her public smile again as though nothing had happened. Amara stared at her. In that moment, she understood something the crowd did not. This was not a star amusing herself with a poor worker. This was a woman trying to crush a danger before it could speak. Because Sonia Bello was afraid of a cleaner in cheap gloves, afraid of a woman who had spent the last 5 years scraping together survival in silence, afraid of what Amara knew. The audience saw only a rich singer and a poor cleaner standing under bright light. They saw class, discomfort, and drama. They thought Sonia was about to embarrass a woman who had wandered too close to the stage. They did not know that earlier that evening, Amara had heard something she was never supposed to hear. A crack. A failure. A flaw hidden beneath all the polish. They did not know that the woman standing in yellow gloves had already seen a piece of the truth behind Sonia Bello's carefully guarded legend. And Sonia knew it. That was why she had called her out. That was why she had dragged her into the light before she could speak first. That was why her whisper had carried more fear than cruelty. The band began to play the opening notes of Rise Again. Soft at first, then fuller. Amara stood at the center of the stage, breathing carefully, her cloth still in one hand, her gloves still on, her heart pounding under the stare of the rich, the powerful, and millions of strangers beyond the cameras. Sonia stepped back with a smile, giving the impression of generosity. But inside that smile was panic. Because if Amara opened her mouth tonight, this moment would become bigger than public embarrassment. It could become exposure. It could become scandal. It could become the beginning of the end for everything Sonia Bello had built. And that raised one terrible question no one in the room yet knew to ask. Why was one of the most adored singers in the country so afraid of a poor cleaner? The answer did not begin on that stage. It began years earlier, before the rubber gloves, before cleaning shifts, before tired eyes and late hospital bills. It began when Amara Okiki was still known for something other than survival. Amara was 27 now, but 5 years earlier, she had been 22 and full of quiet promise. Even then, she was not the kind of girl people noticed because she was loud. She was not dramatic. She did not know how to fight for attention in a room. She spoke softly, smiled rarely, and carried herself with a kind of calm that made people look twice without knowing why. She was slim, dark-skinned, and beautiful in a way that did not beg to be seen. Her eyes were large and thoughtful. Her face always carried a little seriousness, as if life had taught her early not to waste joy. When she stood on stage, there was nothing flashy about her. No wild moves, no desperate tricks, no performance built to impress. She only sang. And once she began, people forgot everything else. Her voice had a warmth that settled into the heart before the mind could explain it. The lower notes were rich and full. The higher notes came with a clean ease that never sounded strained. When she moved from one register to another, it felt natural, like water changing direction without breaking. There was no force in it, no noise, just beauty and control. By the middle of Star Voice Nigeria, people had already started talking. Contestants came and went. Some had style, some had confidence, some had stories that pulled pity from the public. But Amara had something harder to replace. She had truth in her voice. Week after week, the audience remembered her. Music bloggers wrote about her. The judges stopped speaking about her as a hidden talent and began speaking about her like a serious contender. Backstage, some contestants liked her. Some feared her. She was the kind of singer who made others rethink their own chances. Even people in the industry who rarely agreed on anything had begun to say the same thing. That quiet girl could win this whole thing. Sonia Bello had noticed it too. At that time, Sonia was already one of the biggest names on the judging panel. She was polished, admired, and skilled in the art of saying exactly what would sound wise on television. When Amara first auditioned, Sonia smiled and praised her tone. During the next rounds, she called her special. She even once said Amara had the kind of voice that only came once in a long while. The audience loved those moments. They thought Sonia was supporting her. Amara believed it too. She was young then. She had not yet learned that praise from the wrong person could hide fear. As the show went on and Amara kept surviving each round, Sonia's smile remained. But something underneath it began to change. Her praise became thinner. Her eyes sharpened. The warmth she showed on camera no longer matched the way she looked at Amara when the cameras moved away. Amara noticed it, but she did not understand it. Not then. At that point, she still believed talent would speak for itself. She still believed good things could happen without someone powerful deciding to crush them first. Back then, life was not rich, but it was still whole. Her father was a calm man who believed in routine, prayer, and hard work. Her mother was gentle but strong, the kind of woman who could stretch little food into enough for a family and still ask if everyone had eaten well. Their home was modest. Nothing in it was expensive, but it was peaceful. And then there was Dara. Dara was 14 at the time, younger, bright, playful when she felt well, and deeply attached to her sister. She loved watching Amara rehearse. She would sit cross-legged and smile as though her sister's voice alone could make the walls wider. But Dara had been sick for some time. At first it had come in waves: fatigue, pain, weakness that passed and returned. Then hospital visits became regular. Tests became more serious. Medicines multiplied. Some days she looked almost normal. On other days, her body reminded them that something deeper was wrong. Still, they kept hoping. Hope is what families hold when money cannot do much else. By the time the Star Voice Nigeria finale arrived, Amara had reached the biggest night of her life. The stage was bigger than anything she had ever stood on. The lights were brighter. The audience was louder. Her dress had been borrowed and adjusted in a hurry, but on her it looked simple and lovely. Backstage, makeup artists moved around quickly. Crew members passed with clipboards and headsets. Other finalists were rehearsing last lines under their breath. Amara stood near a side mirror, hands cold, heart pounding, trying to steady herself before her turn. She should have been nervous only about the performance. She should have been thinking about her first note, her breath control, the way she would enter the chorus. She should have been thinking about the future opening before her. Instead, her phone began to ring. She almost ignored it. The rules were clear. Phones were not meant to distract contestants before live performance, but something about the number made her chest tighten. It was from the hospital. She picked up at once. The voice on the other end was urgent and strained. There had been an emergency. Dara had collapsed again. Her condition had suddenly worsened. Their parents had been rushing her to the hospital when another disaster struck. There had been an accident on the road. For a second, Amara could not breathe. The nurse spoke quickly, but the words landed one after another like stones. Her father was in critical condition. Her mother was badly injured. Dara was alive but unstable. Amara stared ahead without seeing anything. The noise of the backstage area seemed to move far away from her. Her ears were still hearing, but her mind had already left the building. Someone touched her shoulder and asked if she was all right. She did not answer. She did not ask permission. She did not wait for anyone to advise her. She picked up the small bag she had brought, turned, and ran. People called after her. One of the production assistants tried to stop her, confused and annoyed. Another contestant stepped aside in shock. Somewhere behind her, someone asked where she was going. Amara did not explain. There are moments when explanation becomes too small for what is happening. She ran out of the building, found a taxi, and kept praying all the way to the hospital with hands that would not stop shaking. By the time she got there, the world she knew had already begun to break apart. Her father died first. He did not survive the injuries from the accident. Her mother held on for a few more days, long enough to speak weakly, long enough to ask about Dara, long enough to look at Amara with the kind of pain only a mother feels when she knows she is leaving her children behind. Then she died too. Dara survived. But survival did not come with relief. The doctors told Amara the truth, with the flat voice of people who had seen too much suffering to dress it up. Dara's liver condition was severe. It was not getting better. It was getting worse. She would need long-term treatment, close monitoring, and more money than Amara's family had ever had at one time. In 1 week, Amara lost both parents and the future she had been standing on. The girl who was supposed to sing in the final round of the biggest music competition in the country became something else overnight. She became the one who signed forms, the one who answered doctors, the one who sat beside a hospital bed and pretended not to be afraid, the one who went home to a house that no longer had parents in it and tried to act as though the walls were still holding. She did not just lose a career opportunity. She lost the shape of her life. And because there was no uncle stepping forward, no aunt with enough strength, no hidden support waiting in the background, it became only her and Dara. Just the two of them. Amara became head of the family at 22. That should have broken people's hearts. Instead, it became gossip. The finale went on without her. The public got only fragments at first. A contestant had vanished before the biggest performance of her life. Rumors spread fast, as rumors always do when truth is slower and less entertaining. Some said she panicked. Some said she had become proud. Some said she thought disappearing would make her more talked about. Then the media turned to Sonia Bello for comment. And Sonia, with a calm face and a voice full of false disappointment, said the sentence that destroyed what was left of Amara's public name. Anyone who walks away from destiny does not deserve it. That line was repeated everywhere. On entertainment blogs, on radio, on television panels, on social media. It sounded sharp, wise, harsh in a way people enjoy when the person being judged is not them. No one cared to ask what had really happened. No one cared that Amara had run from the stage because her family was bleeding and breaking. No one cared that by the time the country was debating her attitude, she was in a hospital corridor trying to understand how to bury 2 parents and keep her little sister alive. The label came quickly. Unserious, ungrateful, unprofessional. A girl who threw away the chance of a lifetime. And once the entertainment industry decides on a story, truth becomes harder to sell than lies. Doors closed. Record labels stopped showing interest. Calls stopped coming. People who had praised her gift suddenly acted as though they had never really believed in her. No one wanted to risk money on a singer whose name had already been stained with public shame. That was how Amara disappeared from the music industry. Not because she lacked talent, not because she stopped loving it, but because while her whole life was burning down, someone powerful stood before the cameras and made her pain look like failure. And now, 5 years later, that same woman was standing on a glittering stage, smiling for the world, while the girl she had buried was back under the lights in a cleaner's uniform. The difference was that Amara was no longer 22. She was no longer innocent enough to think talent alone could protect a person. And Sonia Bello knew that. That was why, the moment their eyes met across that auditorium, fear had entered Sonia's smile. Because Amara had not only returned, she had heard something. She had seen something. And if she spoke, the woman who once ruined her could finally begin to fall. And yet, 5 years later, while Sonia Bello was still standing in light, Amara was living inside the kind of exhaustion that did not leave room for dreams. She and Dara now lived in a small old apartment that looked tired even in daylight. The walls had patches where paint had peeled away. The ceiling fan made a soft grinding sound whenever power came. The kitchen was barely more than a narrow corner with a small gas burner, a plastic shelf, and a sink that leaked when the tap was turned too hard. Nothing there was comfortable, but it was clean. Amara made sure of that. She washed the curtains herself. She folded Dara's clothes neatly. She kept the floor swept, the plates arranged, the bed made, and the little table by the window free of clutter. There was no money for beauty, but there was still order. There was no ease, but there was still self-respect. Dignity was one of the few things poverty had not yet taken from her, and she guarded it quietly. Her life had become a chain of shifts, transport, hospital visits, and numbers that never added up. In the mornings and afternoons, she worked at the auditorium as part of the cleaning staff. She wiped chairs, mopped floors, emptied bins, polished rails, and cleaned spaces that rich people entered without seeing the hands that kept them spotless. At night, she washed dishes at a restaurant. By the time she got home most days, her back ached, her wrists hurt, and her legs felt heavy enough to give way beneath her. Some nights she slept for 3 hours, some nights even less. There were weeks when she could not remember the last time her body had felt rested. But rest had become a luxury she could not afford. Everything she earned went somewhere urgent. Dara's medicines, her tests, transport to and from the hospital, special food when the doctors insisted, admission deposits, drugs that were never cheap, bills that kept arriving whether they were ready or not. Dara was 19 now. She was no longer the small girl who used to sit on the floor and beam whenever Amara rehearsed. She had grown into a young woman with a bright mind and a soft face that still carried traces of the child she used to be. Even now, when pain was not pressing her down, Dara could still laugh suddenly and beautifully. She could still tease Amara. She could still speak about the future as though she intended to meet it. But illness had changed her body. She tired too quickly. Some days her skin looked dull and stretched with weakness. Some mornings she woke with no strength in her limbs. There were times she could not eat. There were times the pain in her side made even sitting up difficult. The doctors had stopped speaking in hopeful half-sentences. They spoke clearly now. Her liver disease had worsened. She needed an expensive procedure. And not just the procedure. There would be treatment after. Monitoring, recovery, more drugs, more tests. The total cost was beyond what 2 honest hands could produce in the short time they had left. Amara had already applied for every small support she could find. She had begged for payment extensions. She had spoken to hospital staff with folded patients until some of them began to greet her by name. She had borrowed a little, saved a little, cut food where she could, postponed everything that could be postponed. Still, after all that, she was nowhere near what was needed. She needed a huge amount of money. Fast. That truth followed her everywhere like another shadow. And yet, for all life had taken from her, Amara had not stopped singing completely. Music had left the stage, the studio, the cameras, and the applause, but it had not left her. It came out at night. It came out in hospital rooms and in the small apartment when Dara was too afraid to sleep. Whenever the pain grew worse or fear settled into Dara's face, Amara would sit beside her and sing softly. Not performance songs, not competition songs. Usually the old hymns their mother used to sing while cooking, washing clothes, or combing their hair on quiet evenings. Dara always listened with her eyes half closed. And somehow it helped. The nurses had noticed it too. There were times Dara's breathing, which had been shallow and uneven, calmed while Amara sang. Her pulse steadied, her face relaxed. Even when the pain did not fully leave, the panic loosened its grip. No one could explain it in medical language. Amara did not need them to. She knew what it was. It was the only thing she still had that reached her sister, where medicine could not reach. She no longer sang for applause. She sang because fear listened to her voice and backed away a little. That was the life she had been living when Sonia Bello announced the charity gala. The event was called Voices of Healing. It was advertised everywhere as an evening of compassion, sincerity, and live music for people battling serious organ diseases. Sonia's team pushed one message again and again, that she would be giving donors not just performance, but heart. Her natural voice, her emotions. A raw night of music meant to move people enough to give generously. That was what made the whole thing so bitter. Because Dara was exactly the kind of patient Sonia claimed to care about. Weeks earlier, hospital officials had reached out for consent to use patient stories and photographs as part of the campaign. They said it would help donors connect with the cause. They said it could bring in money for people in urgent need. Amara had signed. She remembered holding the pen and hesitating for only a second before writing her name. She had felt ashamed of the desperation behind the choice, but desperation does not ask permission before entering a person's life. If Dara's face on a screen could help save her, then so be it. So on the night of the gala, Dara's face was there, bright and quiet on the giant screen inside the auditorium. One among many. A real patient behind a glamorous appeal. And ticket sales alone had already brought in more money than Amara could imagine holding in her hands. The donations expected that night would push the amount even higher. She kept thinking one thought she hated. A small piece of this one night could save Dara. A very small piece. That was why the cruelty of what followed cut so deep. Sonia was standing in wealth built around visible suffering, and somewhere behind all the makeup and stage lights, Amara could not stop thinking of her sister's hospital wristband, her test results, her tired smile. Before the gala began, Amara was backstage doing what she always did, working quietly, staying out of people's way, cleaning around importance without disturbing it. Crew members moved in and out with headsets and folders. Instrument cables ran across the floor. Makeup assistants passed by with hurried faces. The air smelled of powder, perfume, and stage heat. Amara had been wiping down a glass panel near the side of the performance area when Sonia walked in for rehearsal. Even in rehearsal, Sonia carried herself like someone performing for unseen eyes. She wore a fitted robe over her stage outfit, and people parted for her without needing to be told. Her band was already in place. Her team stood nearby, alert and careful. The first part of the rehearsal sounded normal enough. Sonia began warming up with Reese again. The lower parts came out solid, controlled, polished, the kind of singing expected from someone with her reputation. Nothing in those first phrases would have raised suspicion. But Amara was not just hearing the song. She was listening. Really listening. That came from years of training, years of learning how breath sits inside a note, how strain enters before the voice breaks, how a singer's body tells the truth, even when the mouth is still trying to hide it. As the melody began to rise toward the final praise lift, Amara's hand slowed on the glass. Something was wrong. Sonia's neck tightened first. Then her shoulders rose a little. Her face changed. It was small but clear to anyone who truly knew singing. The ease disappeared. The body began to fight the note instead of carrying it. The climb continued. Then Sonia reached for the final climax. And failed. The note never opened. She did not get near the true top of it. Instead, her voice cracked below it and splintered into an ugly break that vanished into the room so quickly one of the backup singers looked down at once. For a second, nobody spoke. Then Sonia cleared her throat, gave a short laugh, and blamed dryness. Her voice was calm, but there was irritation under it. She turned to the sound team and told them to increase the backing support. Not casually, sharply. One of the technicians adjusted something at once. The band started again. Sonia sang the build-up a second time, and this time, when the final lift came, the famous high note rang out above the music. Bright, clean, dramatic, almost too perfect. Amara's head lifted. The sound was wrong. Not because it was bad. Because it was too polished, too exact, too detached from the body standing at the microphone. The gala had been advertised around Sonia's natural voice and emotion. Donors were meant to be moved by the truth of what they heard, by the feeling that she was stripping away performance and singing from the heart for sick people who needed help. But what Amara heard was not that. The note sat strangely above the rest, smooth in a way live singing rarely stays under strain. It did not blend into Sonia's voice. It hovered over it, layered, polished, separate. Amara stared. The cloth in her hand dropped slightly. She knew that sound. Not from gossip, not from guesswork. From training. From instinct. From the ear of a singer who had once lived on stage herself. That note was pre-recorded. Sonia Bello was not singing it live. She was singing into the moment and letting another voice carry the glory. And in that instant, standing backstage with a cleaning cloth in her hand while a charity event for patients like Dara was being built on borrowed emotion, Amara understood something that made her stomach turn. Sonia was not just performing. She was deceiving people, using polished lies to open their wallets, using pain she did not carry to strengthen an image she did not deserve. Amara stood very still as the final note faded from the speakers. Across the room, Sonia was smiling again, already recovering, already looking like a woman in complete control. But something had cracked, and only Amara had heard it clearly enough to know what it meant. That was the moment everything changed. Because once you hear the truth hiding inside a lie, it becomes difficult to go back to silence. Amara stood where she was for a few seconds after rehearsal ended, her hand still holding the cloth, her mind no longer in the room. Around her, people continued moving as if nothing important had happened. A makeup artist hurried past with a case in her hand. One of the backup singers laughed at something a band member said. A stage assistant adjusted a stand and checked a list. Life went on. But something inside Amara had shifted. She turned quietly and walked away from the rehearsal area before anyone could notice the look on her face. She entered the small staff corridor behind the stage where the bright glamour of the event gave way to dim walls, stacked supplies, and the tired smell of cleaning liquid and old wires. There, she stopped. Her heart was beating too fast. She put the cloth down on a shelf, pulled out her phone, and opened her browser with fingers that suddenly felt stiff. At first, she did not even know what exactly she was looking for. She only knew she needed to see whether what she had just heard was part of something bigger, or whether she was letting anger speak too quickly. So she searched Sonia Bello's name with the charity title, then the names of past events, then older reports, then patient funds. At first she found the usual things: beautiful photographs, magazine write-ups, interviews full of soft words. Sonia smiling beside hospital beds, Sonia crying on stage, Sonia talking about compassion, healing, and giving back. Amara kept scrolling. Then, buried under louder headlines and polished publicity, she found a small report from the previous year. It was not from a major platform. It looked like the kind of piece people ignore because it does not come wrapped in fame. But the figures were there. She read it once, then again. The report questioned the financial records tied to one of Sonia's earlier medical charity events. According to what had been traced, only a small percentage of the money raised had reached actual patients or hospital support programs. The rest had disappeared into harmless-sounding phrases: administrative expenses, production costs, image management, brand partnerships, Event presentation. Promotion. Amara stared at the screen until her eyes began to sting. She clicked another link, then another. The pattern became clearer. Different event. Same story. A lot of public emotion. A lot of coverage. A lot of money. And somehow, too little reaching the people whose suffering had been used to open wallets. Amara lowered the phone slowly. Something hard settled inside her. Before this moment, Sonia had been one more powerful person in a long line of people life had taught her to avoid. She was cruel, yes. False, yes. But still part of a world Amara no longer belonged to. Now it felt different. Now the full shape of the wickedness stood in front of her. Sonia was faking the very gift people were paying to witness. She was using sick people as a backdrop for image and praise, and she was making money from false compassion. Amara thought of her parents. Not as memories dressed in sorrow, but as real people. Her father's tired hands, her mother's voice in the kitchen, the ordinary love that had held their home together before one terrible night shattered it. They had died while trying to save Dara. That truth had never stopped hurting. Then she thought of Dara herself, 19. Too young to be speaking in the careful, tired voice of someone always measuring pain. Too young to be learning hospital routines by heart. Too young to sit on a bed and calculate whether medicine could wait until next week. Then Amara's mind widened beyond her own family. She thought of the other faces that would appear on those screens tonight. Other patients. Other frightened families. Other people already hanging over the edge, hoping someone somewhere would care enough to help. How many of them could be saved with the money being swallowed in the name of kindness? How many mothers were crying quietly because they had reached the point where treatment depended on mercy? How many sisters like Dara were close to death while Sonia's team counted branding costs? Then the final thought came. Sonia had not only built herself on lies, she had once helped bury Amara's own life. She had spoken one sentence into the public, and people had used it to close doors on a girl whose parents had just died. She had watched Amara fall and had not cared. For 5 years, Amara had swallowed all of it. The grief, the shame, the hunger, the helplessness, the long humiliation of being unseen. But something in her finally refused to bend any further. For the first time in years, silence became impossible. A voice called from down the corridor, asking where the mop bucket had been kept. Amara locked her phone and slipped it back into her pocket. She picked up the cloth again and returned to work, but she was no longer the same woman who had walked away from rehearsal minutes earlier. The gala began at last. By the time the guests had all settled, the auditorium looked like a world built to impress those who had money and punish those who did not. The lights glowed warm and expensive. The stage shimmered. Cameras moved with smooth confidence. Every seat was filled by people who smelled of perfume, polished fabric, and certainty. From where Amara worked near the side, she could hear the soft rise and fall of wealthy voices, the little laughter, the easy way some people spoke as if suffering belonged to other families. Then Sonia Bello walked on stage. The applause came immediately. She stood under the light looking flawless and noble, dressed in silver, her face arranged into that familiar expression of graceful sorrow she used whenever she wanted to seem deeply moved by the pain of others. She thanked the guests for attending. She spoke about compassion, healing, and responsibility. She said the night was about standing with the vulnerable. Then she made the promise. Every naira given tonight, she said, would help those in need. The audience clapped hard. Some people nodded with shining eyes. Others looked around as though proud of themselves already. On the front rows, a few women lifted their phones and whispered about how beautiful Sonia looked, how noble she was, how rare it was to see someone with fame still care so deeply. Amara stood half hidden beside the curtain, listening, and felt something bitter rise in her throat. Then the giant screen behind Sonia came alive with photographs. Patients. Hospital rooms. Thin wrists. Tired faces. Quiet eyes. And there, large and clear, was Dara. For 1 second, Amara forgot where she was. Her sister's face filled the screen, not smiling widely, not posing, just looking young and fragile and real. The hall went quiet in that respectful way people do when pain has been arranged for them in a beautiful format. Amara's chest tightened so sharply she almost had to grab the curtain beside her. That image pushed her over the edge. Because Dara was not a symbol. She was not an emotional tool. She was a real person lying in hospital beds and forcing herself to smile through fear. And Sonia was using her. The set began. Sonia sang the first songs with care and drama. Her voice moved through them well enough. The audience admired her more with every passing minute. Some people in the hall wiped their eyes. Others whispered again about her beauty, her grace, her good heart. The cameras followed her as though every turn of her head was worth capturing. It was almost unbearable to watch. Then Sonia smiled and announced the song the crowd had been waiting for. Rise Again. She spoke of it like a sacred thing. She said the song had become proof that the human spirit could rise above pain. She called it a gift. She described its final praise lift as a sound born from deep truth and strength. The audience applauded before the song even started. Amara stood in the wings and felt anger turn into something cleaner. Not rage. Resolve. The band began. The opening lines came. Sonia sang. The room listened. The song climbed little by little, and when it neared the famous final rise, Amara already knew what would happen. It happened exactly as she expected. That fake support slid in again. That polished note that did not belong to the woman at the microphone. That borrowed glory. Amara stepped out from the wings. No speech. No plan. Just truth, refusing to stay hidden. At first, only a few people noticed. Then Sonia saw movement near the side of the stage and turned. The moment her eyes landed on Amara, something flickered across her face before the smile returned. She recognized her at once. Not the cleaner. The woman beneath the uniform. The former contestant. The quiet girl from years ago whose voice had once made judges lean forward. The girl Sonia had helped destroy. And in that instant, Sonia understood what Amara's presence meant. Amara might speak. Amara might expose her. So Sonia did the thing people like her always do when danger gets too close. She attacked first. She gave a little laugh into the microphone and lifted one hand toward Amara, as if spotting an amusing interruption. "Oh," she said with bright surprise, "look who has joined us." The camera followed at once. The audience turned. Amara stopped walking, but she did not step back. Sonia smiled wider. "Some of you may remember her," she said. "This is Amara Okeke. Once upon a time, she was one of the hopeful contestants on Star Voice Nigeria." A ripple moved through the hall. Recognition, confusion, curiosity. Sonia tilted her head and continued, her voice soft with poisonous sweetness. "A gifted girl," they said. "A bright future," they said, "but life is strange. Some people meet opportunity and throw it away with both hands." A few people laughed. Not loudly, but enough. Amara opened her mouth. "Sonia, I need to..." Sonia spoke over her at once. "And now," she said, "as you can all see, she helps clean up after people who stayed focused." The laughter came a little easier now. Some guests exchanged looks, others frowned. A few began whispering, sensing that something about the moment was turning ugly. Amara felt heat rise into her face, but she kept walking. She had lived through worse things than laughter. She had buried parents. She had signed hospital forms with trembling hands. She had gone to bed hungry so Dara could eat. Public mockery could still wound her, but it no longer had the power to erase her. "Sonia," she said again, her voice low but steady. "You're lying to these people." That landed. The room changed. The laughter thinned. Heads turned more sharply now. Cameras locked in harder. Sonia's eyes flashed, but her smile remained. "Lying?" she repeated lightly, as if the word itself was silly coming from Amara's mouth. "My dear, if you wanted attention, there were easier ways." Amara tried again. "That song." Sonia cut across her with practiced ease. "You know, this is very sad," she told the audience. "Some people cannot accept the lives they created for themselves. They see success and imagine it was stolen from them." So they drift from one job to another, carrying bitterness like a handbag. This time, fewer people laughed. The cruelty was becoming too clear. Amara took another step forward. She no longer cared who liked what she was doing. "You are not singing that note live," she said. That sentence did what the hall had not expected. It split the air open. Some people gasped. Others sat upright. A journalist near the front lowered his pen, then lifted it again quickly. The band did not stop, but they faltered just enough for trained ears to hear. Sonia's smile almost broke, but only almost. Instead of denying it at once, she chose humiliation again. She thought shame would work faster. Shame had always worked on ordinary people. She walked toward Amara with that graceful, dangerous calm that rich cruelty often wears. "My dear," Sonia said into the microphone, "do you know what I think? I think you have spent too much time in the dark watching lives you could have had, and now you have confused envy with courage." Amara said nothing. Sonia circled her slightly, speaking to the crowd more than to her now. "This is what happens when people refuse discipline. Talent alone is not enough. Character matters. Focus matters. Staying in your lane matters." The words drew a few more scattered laughs, but the room was no longer settled. People were murmuring openly now. Some looked entertained, some uncomfortable, some suddenly very alert. Sonia pressed on, sensing she needed to crush Amara quickly. "You came near this stage in a cleaner's uniform and thought perhaps old memories would make you relevant again," she said. "Is that it? You want us to pause the entire night because you once sang on television and now life has not gone as you hoped?" Amara's fingers tightened around the cloth still hanging from one hand. She could feel the cameras loving Sonia's performance. The wounded star, the bitter nobody, the neat story. But Sonia had made one mistake. She kept talking because she was afraid. And fear always talks too much. "Go back," Sonia said at last, voice sharpening behind the sweetness, "before you embarrass yourself further." Amara looked at her. Then she looked at the audience. Then at the giant screen where faces like Dara's still glowed behind them. And something in her settled. "No," she said. It was not loud, but it carried. The hall fell strangely quiet. Sonia stared at her for one beat too long. Then, because pride would not let her retreat, because she still believed she could turn the whole thing into entertainment and bury Amara once and for all, she smiled again and lifted the microphone. "Well then," she said, "since you clearly miss the spotlight so much, let us help you." She turned to the band. "Stop." The music died. Every eye in the room was now fixed on the two women standing under the lights. Sonia extended one hand toward Amara with elegant mockery. "Sing." The word dropped like a challenge. A few people in the audience shifted forward at once. Others held their breath. Somewhere near the back, a phone was raised higher. Sonia's smile widened. She was sure of herself again. Sure that Amara would freeze. Sure that memory would break her. Sure that the same fear that had once driven her from a stage would drive her away now. And if Amara ran, Sonia would win twice. She would keep her lie. And she would make the whole country watch Amara fail all over again. Sonia's smile widened. She was sure of herself again. Sure that Amara would freeze. Sure that memory would break her. Sure that the same fear that had once driven her from a stage would drive her away now. And if Amara ran, Sonia would win twice. She would keep her lie. And she would make the whole country watch Amara fail all over again. But Amara did not run. She stood there under the light, the cloth still in her hand, her cleaning gloves still on, her heart beating so hard she could feel it in her throat. The whole room was waiting for her to sing, to tremble, to embarrass herself, or to turn and flee. Instead, she lifted her head and asked one simple question. "Can the backing track be turned off?" The room changed. Not loudly at first. It was just a shift, a pause, a strange tightening in the air, as though people who had come to be entertained had suddenly realized something else was happening. Sonia gave a small laugh. "It is part of the arrangement," she said, waving one hand lightly. "You would not understand that." Amara did not move. "I heard you rehearse without it." That drew a few sharp murmurs. Sonia's face stayed smooth, but her eyes hardened. Amara continued, her voice steady. You sang the song earlier, without the extra support. Do it again. The murmurs spread further now. People were no longer just watching drama. They were beginning to listen. A woman in the second row turned to the man beside her and whispered something into his ear. One reporter near the aisle lowered his phone, then lifted it higher. Sonia's pride rose before her caution could stop it. For one brief moment, she might still have stepped away. She might have laughed it off, moved on to another song, blamed time, blamed production, blamed anything. But Sonia Bello had lived too long inside applause. She was used to crushing anyone who stood below her. She was used to being admired, obeyed, protected. So she smiled again and said, Fine. She turned sharply toward the band. Cut the backing support. The musicians hesitated for a second. Not because they did not hear her, but because everyone on that stage now understood that something dangerous had begun. Then the sound changed. The music became bare. There was less cushion beneath the song now, less glitter around it. Just instruments, a microphone, a woman's real voice. Sonia lifted her chin and began. The opening section was acceptable. Her tone was controlled. Her breath held. The notes came out clearly enough to satisfy anyone who did not know what to listen for. A few people in the audience relaxed. Some even looked around as if to say, perhaps the cleaner had made a foolish mistake after all. But Amara did not react. She listened. The song moved forward. Then it approached the place that mattered. The signature climb. The section everyone knew. The moment where Riza again stopped being a popular song and became legend. Sonia's body changed again. Her neck tightened. Her shoulders rose. The ease disappeared from her face. She pushed into the climb, trying to hold control, but the higher she reached, the thinner the sound became. She missed the peak. The voice narrowed. Then it cracked. It was not a small slip this time. Not in a room this quiet. The broken note hit the air and fell apart. The hall reacted all at once. Some gasped. Some stared. Some blinked as if their minds needed another second to catch up. Sonia stopped, cleared her throat, and reached for her water with a hand that was almost steady. My throat is dry, she said. I have had a long evening. Anyone who knows live performance understands that vocal protection matters. But the audience had heard enough. The excuse landed weakly. Amara looked at her and said very quietly, You cannot sing the note that made you famous. No one expected a cleaner to say something like that on a stage like this. And yet, once the words were spoken, they did not sound foolish. They sounded dangerous. Sonia turned slowly. Excuse me? Amara no longer looked like a woman being mocked. Something about her had changed. The fear was still there, but it was no longer ruling her. She spoke with the calm of someone who had already survived worse than this room. The climax of Rise Again is not just shouting, she said. It is not just power. It is a praise lift into a C-sharp 6, controlled, bright, clean. You never reach it naturally. The audience grew still in a different way now. This was no longer simple humiliation. This was technical, specific, hard to dismiss with one cruel smile. Amara continued. What you sang just now was lower, thinner. It was already breaking before you got there. The phones in the audience began rising faster now, more screens, better angles. Journalists started typing with real urgency. Then Amara said the thing that struck the room like a blow. The voice on that song is not your voice. That one sentence broke the hall open. Voices rose at once. What? Did she say not her voice? Record this. Zoom in. Sonia's face lost color for a second, but she recovered quickly enough to show anger instead. And who, she asked coldly, is going to believe that? You? A cleaner? There it was. The weapon she trusted most. Status. Not truth, not evidence. Status. Who will believe a cleaner? For years that question had been enough to keep many people silent. It had been enough to erase the poor, shame the weak, and protect the powerful. But tonight, something was different. Truth had already entered the room, and once it enters, It changes the smell of everything. It was beginning to smell like smoke now. Like something polished was burning underneath all that beauty. Sonia sensed it too. Her eyes flashed toward the sound section, as if checking who might still be loyal, who might still help bury this. And then, before she could say anything else, a voice came from the side of the stage. "She's telling the truth." The whole auditorium turned. A man stepped forward from near the sound booth. Daniel Danjuma, Sonia's sound engineer. He looked pale, but his face had the stillness of a man who had already fought the battle inside himself and was now done hiding. For a second, Sonia just stared at him, unable to believe what she was seeing. Daniel swallowed once, then spoke into the silence. "For years," he said, "I've been the one triggering the pre-recorded vocal during that part of the song. Every live show, every major event, every time the final climax comes, the track comes in." The audience seemed to forget how to breathe. Sonia found her voice first. "Daniel." He did not stop. "She has never sung that note live," he said. "Not once." This time the shock rolled through the room like a wave. Guests leaned forward. One woman covered her mouth. The journalists stopped pretending this might still be gossip and started typing like people chasing headlines before someone else stole them. Sonia looked as if the stage itself had tilted beneath her. "Shut up," she snapped. Daniel kept going. The audience was always meant to believe it was live. The whole thing was built that way. "Shut up," Sonia shouted, and now the grace was gone. She pointed at him with a shaking hand. "You're fired." Daniel gave a tired nod. "I know." That answer carried more weight than a speech. He knew. He had stepped forward anyway. And now the damage was beyond control. The audience had moved past curiosity. They were shocked now. Truly shocked. The kind of shock that begins in disbelief and ends in judgment. For the first time that night, Sonia looked scared. Not angry. Not offended. Scared. It flashed through her face before she could hide it, and once it showed, it made everything worse. She turned back to Amara as if fury might still save her. "Fine," she said, her voice sharp and rising. "Fine. Since all of you want a show, let us have one." Her eyes locked onto Amara with sudden hate. "You sing it." Amara did not answer. Sonia stepped closer. "No warm-up, no preparation, no excuse. Since you know so much, sing it now." The trap was obvious. Sonia wanted the whole thing to turn again. She wanted the audience to laugh. She wanted Amara to fail under pressure so everything could become messy enough to confuse the truth. She wanted to drag the moment back into performance where she knew how to control the story. Amara's heartbeat quickened again. Because now the room was facing her. Now all those raised phones were pointed at her. Now the stage that once nearly changed her life had opened under her feet for a second time. For one dangerous moment, memory rushed up. Star Voice Nigeria. The last night and the hot lights. The feeling of a life about to change. Then the phone call. The hospital. The loss. The collapse that followed. Her throat tightened. Sonia saw it and smiled. Yes, that smile seemed to say. Run again. Then from somewhere in the crowd, an older voice rang out. "Amara!" She turned. Near the side aisle stood Jude, one of the older cleaners from the auditorium. He had changed out of his work apron, but she knew him at once. He was one of the few people at work who had always spoken to her with respect, not pity. He lifted one hand and called again, louder this time. "Sing the way you sing for Dara." Those words reached her more deeply than all the noise in the room. Not the way she sang on television. Not the way she used to sing to impress judges. Not the way Sonia wanted. The way she sang for Dara. That changed everything. Amara closed her eyes. For 1 second, the auditorium disappeared. The rich people disappeared. The cameras disappeared. The gossip disappeared. In her mind, she saw her sister on a hospital bed, pale, tired, trying to be brave. She heard their mother's voice from years ago, soft and steady in the house they had lost. She remembered all the nights she had sung because there was nothing else left to give except comfort. When she opened her eyes again, she was no longer standing there to defend her pride. She was standing there for truth. For Dara, she said softly, though only those nearest heard it. Then she nodded once to the band. They looked at one another. Daniel, still standing near the sound section, gave a small signal. Play. The opening notes of Rise Again began again. This time the song did not come from ambition. It came from pain. Amara started quietly. No show, no stretching of words, no dramatic performance. Just sound that carried feeling so honestly the room seemed to lean toward it without knowing why. The first lines held grief, then calm, then something deeper. Control. People who had dismissed her because of the gloves on her hands slowly forgot the gloves. They forgot the cloth. They forgot the uniform. All they could hear now was a voice too real to be decorative. As the song rose, her own body did not tighten. It opened. The notes moved upward with ease. No pushing, no strain, just clean movement as natural as breathing. The hall could hear the difference. Even those who knew nothing about music could hear it. Sonia's voice had fought the song. Amara's belonged inside it. The pre-chorus came. Then the bridge. The air in the room changed. What began as curiosity became attention. What began as attention became awe. Then came the climb. The place where Sonia had failed. Amara entered it naturally. Through the upper lift. Steady. Clear. Then into the bright C-sharp 6. The note opened over the hall like light. Not forced, not cracked, not borrowed. Real. She held it cleanly with so much control that for a second the room looked stunned into silence. Then before the shock could settle, she stretched even higher, touched the air above it, and descended with smooth control that sounded effortless. The final line landed with quiet power. Then the song ended. No one moved. Not at first. The silence that followed was unlike the earlier silence of tension. This one was disbelief trying to become understanding. Then the room exploded. The sound hit all at once. Gasps. Shouts. Applause rising like a wave. People stood to their feet without planning to. Phones shook in the air. Some guests were crying. Others were staring at Sonia and then back at Amara, as if their minds were still trying to accept what had just happened. It was not because a cleaner had sung well. It was because a truth everyone had underestimated had just become undeniable. And now, under the same lights where Sonia had tried to humiliate her, Amara was no longer the woman being mocked. She was the woman the whole room could no longer ignore. The applause kept rolling through the auditorium like it did not want to stop. Amara stood at the center of the stage, still holding the cloth in one hand, still wearing the yellow gloves she had forgotten were even on her fingers. Her chest was rising and falling, but her face was calm. It was not the calm of comfort. It was the calm of someone who had crossed a line and could not return to the person she was before it. All around her, people were on their feet. Some were clapping. Some were staring. Some were looking from Amara to Sonia and back again, as if truth had just changed shape in front of them, and they were struggling to accept what they had seen. Then a woman stood up in the front row. Rita King. The room reacted at once because Rita King was not just any guest. She was one of those voices people in music still spoke about with respect. She had been singing long before social media began deciding who mattered. She had built a career the old way, with talent, discipline, and truth people could hear. Rita did not clap immediately. She looked straight at Amara first, with wet eyes and a face that held no expression. Then she said into the silence, "That was not luck. That was not anger, that was ga'ift." The room was quiet enough to hear every word. Rita took one step into the aisle and continued, "Young woman, your voice is real, and everybody in this room knows the difference." That hit harder than applause, because it was not excitement. It was recognition. Amara looked at her and felt something painful move in her chest. It had been a long time since anyone with that kind of standing had looked at her like she still belonged to music. Then another man stood up 3 rows behind Rita. Tunde Lawson. Older now, broad-shouldered, serious-faced, respected in the industry in the way producers are respected when they have helped shape songs people never forget. He did not look eager to speak. He looked like a man walking into something he had avoided for too long. He lifted one hand slightly. I need to say something. The room turned again. Sonia's face changed at once. Tunde, sit down. But Tunde did not sit. He looked at the stage, then at the audience, then finally at Sonia. I was there during the original recording sessions of Reese Again, he said. A fresh hush fell over the hall. Tunde took a breath before continuing, as if the truth had weight and he could feel every part of it. The famous climax note on that record was not sung by Sonia Bello. You could almost hear the hall inhale. Tunde went on. It was sung by another woman, a studio vocalist named Amaka Naji. A loud wave of reaction broke through the audience. No. Is that true? Record this. Phones rose higher. Journalists who had already been typing now looked as if they could barely keep up. Somewhere near the back, one of the guests said, "My God," under his breath. Tunde's jaw tightened. He was not proud of what he was saying. That much was obvious. She was paid quietly, he said, and buried under an NDA. The record moved on. The lie stayed alive, and the rest of us... He paused, ashamed. The rest of us stayed silent because this industry protects money, image, and power. No one interrupted him now. That confession was too heavy. For years, silence had protected Sonia. Now silence was breaking in public, and it sounded uglier than anyone expected. Sonia's composure shattered. "You people have lost your minds," she shouted. The microphone carried her voice too sharply through the hall. All the careful softness she had worn at the beginning of the night was gone now. In its place was fury. She pointed at Tunde. "You are a liar." Then at Amara. "And you..." Her voice rose higher. "You think because you came here in your dirty uniform and made a little noise, your life will change?" The crowd shifted uneasily. Some of the guests were no longer admiring her now. They were seeing her. Really seeing her. Sonia turned fully to Amara, and whatever good sense she still had vanished under anger. "You should have stayed where you belong," she snapped. "Because if you keep this up, you and that sick sister of yours will regret it." The hall went dead quiet. Amara felt the blood leave her face. Sonia took one step closer, breathing hard, and made it even worse. "Do you hear me?" she said. "You have no idea what I can do. Do not use your sister's illness to stand against me." Every word went through the microphone. Every word. There was no taking it back. The threat hung in the air like something foul. A few people gasped openly. Rita King looked disgusted. Tunde stared at Sonia as if even he had not expected her to fall that far that fast. Then the noise began again, but now it was different. Phones. Whispers. Messages moving in real time. Social media was already catching fire. The clip of Sonia threatening Amara and mentioning Dara's illness spread before the band had even fully stepped away from their instruments. By the time venue security began trying to calm the room, people were already saying the same thing across different screens. Sonia Bello threatened a poor cleaner live on stage. She lied. She mocked a sick girl's family. She has been exposed. The show could not recover after that. It ended in fragments. Guests leaving in clusters. Journalists chasing quotes. Management staff moving with frightened faces. Crew members speaking in low, urgent tones. Amara was led off the stage not like a criminal, but like someone standing in the middle of a storm she had not expected to survive. Backstage, the air felt hotter and smaller. Jude found her first. He pressed a bottle of water into her hand and told her to sit down before her legs gave way. Daniel was there too, silent and pale. Tunde came briefly, looked at her with regret and respect and told her, "I should have spoken years ago." Amara nodded, but her mind was far away. All she could hear was Sonia's words. "You and that sick sister of yours will regret it." That was what frightened her. Not the insult. Not even the public attention. It was Dara. Always Dara. A woman in a cream suit appeared a few minutes later. She was elegant, neat, and calm in the cold way some people are calm because they are used to bringing bad news while sounding polite. She held a structured handbag and wore a face that did not waste emotion. She stopped in front of Amara and gave a small professional smile. "My name is Bisi Adebayo," she said. "I represent Sonia Bello." Jude straightened at once. Amara looked up but did not stand. Bisi glanced around at the people near Amara, then back at her. "Tonight has become unfortunate. My client would prefer a private resolution." Amara said nothing. Bisi reached into her handbag and brought out a card. "You should not make any decisions in a place like this," she said gently. "Get some rest. Let us meet tomorrow morning." She placed the card on the table beside Amara. "There is a peaceful way out of this." Then she turned and left. The next morning, Amara met her at a quiet cafe. She had not wanted to go, but she had spent half the night looking at Dara sleeping weakly in their apartment, and the truth was simple. When a powerful woman's lawyer asks to see you after a public threat, refusing to show up feels less like courage and more like walking blindfolded into danger. So she went. The cafe was clean, air-conditioned, and too expensive for someone like Amara to enter without first checking the prices in her head. Bisi was already seated by the window when she arrived, with a folder on the table and the same cold politeness on her face. She did not waste time. "I'm here to help prevent this from becoming uglier than it needs to be," Bisi said. Amara sat quietly. Bisi pushed the folder toward her. Inside were typed documents, a prepared statement, legal language dressed as peace. "If you sign this," Bisi said, "you will state that you misunderstood what happened on stage, that you became emotional, misread the performance setup, and spoke out of personal frustration. You will also say that you only wanted attention after feeling bitterness about your failed career." Amara read the words slowly. Every line felt like a hand trying to erase her. Bisi continued in the same measured voice. "In return, Sonia is willing to act generously." That word almost made Amara laugh. Generously. Bisi listed the offer one piece at a time. Sonia would pay fully for Dara's treatment. She would cover additional recovery expenses. She would fund a respected music development opportunity for Amara. She would make the whole matter disappear. Amara stared at the papers. It was everything she had cried for in private. Everything. The money Dara needed. The treatment. The burden lifted. A path back into music. No court. No scandal. No fear. For a dangerous second, her hand rested on the edge of the folder and did not move. Bisi saw that pause and pressed gently. "You are a young woman under pressure," she said. "No one would blame you for making an emotional mistake. This gives you a way out. It protects your sister. It protects your future." Amara lifted her eyes. "And Sonia?" she asked. Bisi's expression did not change. "My client wants peace." "No," Amara thought. "Your client wants silence." She looked down again at the papers. Dara's treatment. Recovery costs. Music training. The words blurred for a moment because her eyes had filled with tears she refused to let fall there. For years she had carried too much with too little. She had prayed for one break, one open door, one miracle that did not come wrapped in humiliation, and now here it was on paper. But the deeper she looked, the clearer it became. This was not help. It was money in exchange for self-erasure. It was survival at the price of truth. It was an order to call herself a liar so a rich woman could keep feeding on pain with a clean face. Amara closed the folder. When she spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "No." Bisi waited, as if expecting fear to pull the word back. Amara pushed the folder across the table. "I will not sign it." The lawyer's eyes hardened for the first time. "You should think very carefully," she said. "This matter can become very unpleasant." "It already is." Bisi leaned back slightly. "You are refusing treatment money for your sister." Amara swallowed once. That line cut deep because it was meant to. "No," she said. "I am refusing to lie." For a moment neither woman spoke. Then Bisi gathered the papers with slow care. "You have made a serious mistake." Amara rose from her seat. Maybe she had. Maybe war with powerful people always looked like a mistake before it looked like courage. But one thing had become clear to her now. She was not doing this for fame, not for a recording deal, not for attention, not for a payout. She was doing it because the lie had gone too far. By afternoon, Sonia, seeing that she was losing, decided to take a different route. The revenge began. The blogs moved first, then gossip pages, then the kind of online accounts that pretend to ask questions while already pushing a lie. Photos of Amara's apartment appeared online, cropped to look dirtier than it was, presented like evidence of failure. Posts claimed she had planned the stage interruption for attention. Some said she was bitter because her career had collapsed years earlier and she wanted to drag Sonia down with her. Others suggested Dara's illness was being exaggerated for sympathy. A few even hinted it might be fake. Amara sat on the edge of the bed in their apartment, phone in hand, and felt sick. The posts were too many, too fast, too similar. Coordinated. Designed. The cruelty of them lay not only in the lies, but in what they tried to do with poverty. They wanted people to look at her small home, her old furniture, her struggling life, and decide that hardship itself was proof of bad character. As if being poor was suspicious. As if being tired was shameful. As if pain made a person dishonest. By evening, the legal papers arrived. Sonia had filed a massive defamation lawsuit. Not just against Amara. Against Daniel. Against Tunde Lawson. Against Amaka Naji, whose name had now begun to circulate. Even against venue management for failing, as the filing put it, to control staff conduct and protect a performing artist from reputational harm. It was a wide, ugly net. The purpose was obvious. This was not justice. It was fear. Sonia wanted to bury everybody under legal cost, public shame and exhaustion until truth became too expensive to keep telling. Amara held the papers and felt the room spin for a second. Dara, sitting up against the pillow, looked at her sister's face and quietly asked, "Is it bad?" Amara looked at her, at the weakness still living beneath her brave expression, and forced herself to breathe before answering. "Yes," she said. Then she sat beside her sister, took her hand, and spoke the only truth left. "But I think she's more afraid than we are." Amara said it to comfort Dara, but after she spoke, she was not sure whether she believed it yet. The legal papers lay on the small table in their apartment like something poisonous. Dara had gone quiet after reading the fear on her sister's face. Outside, evening traffic moved on as if nothing had changed. Somewhere in the next building, a child was crying. A generator started. Life was continuing, but inside that room, everything felt tight. Amara barely slept that night. By morning, the story had grown bigger. It was no longer just a clip from a charity gala. It was now a public scandal. People were arguing about Sonia Bello on radio, on television, in comment sections, and in group chats. Some still defended her, but the certainty had weakened. Too many people had heard the crack in her voice. Too many had watched her threaten a poor woman and mention a sick girl with such open cruelty. Then, before noon, the next blow landed. Amaka Naji posted a video. At first it appeared on a small page, then on a music blog, then on 3 major platforms within the hour. By afternoon, it was everywhere. Amara watched it on her phone with Dara sitting beside her on the bed. Amaka was seated in what looked like a home studio. No glamour, no fancy styling, just a serious-faced woman with tired eyes and a calm voice that carried years of swallowed anger. "My name is Amaka Naji," she said into the camera. "I am a studio vocalist. I am the one who sang the final climax in Rise Again." Amara's fingers tightened around her phone. Amaka did not stop there. She lifted documents one after another. Contracts, payment records, recording agreements, silence clauses. She showed dates, amounts, email printouts, signatures, notes from sessions. She explained that she had been paid quietly and warned never to claim credit. Then she said something that hit even harder. "It was not only Rise Again," she said. "There are several other tracks credited entirely to Sonia Bello that include lead vocal sections I recorded." The comments under the video moved faster than the screen could refresh. Within an hour, public opinion began to turn sharply. And once Amaka spoke, Others found courage too. Another studio singer came out by evening and said she had provided layered vocal parts on 2 major Sonia records. By night, a third singer posted her own evidence. Then an old session musician gave an interview. A former assistant leaked voice notes. A songwriter quietly confirmed that the myth around Sonia's unmatched natural gift had been carefully built and carefully protected. The silence was breaking from every direction now. More hidden credits surfaced. More stories appeared. And then something even uglier began coming out. Financial records tied to earlier charity events were suddenly being looked at harder. Journalists who had once ignored the numbers started pulling old reports, tracing figures, comparing what had been publicly raised to what had actually reached patients and treatment programs. The deeper they looked, the worse it became. Charity money meant for terminally ill patients had been swallowed through bloated event costs, branding fees, image consulting, management structures, and shell spending no one could clearly explain. Families who had once been promised support started speaking up. One mother said her son's image had been used in a campaign, yet she never received the treatment assistance that had been implied. Another family showed messages and unanswered follow-ups. A small patient group claimed they had been thanked in public but forgotten in private. The cleaner who had been mocked on stage was beginning to look like the only honest person in the whole disaster. That afternoon, Amara received a call from an unfamiliar number. She almost ignored it. Too many strangers had been calling since the scandal broke, some insulting her, some pretending to support her, some fishing for gossip. But something told her to answer. "My name is Maya Okan," the woman said. "I'm a lawyer. I've read the filings. I've seen the footage. I would like to represent you." Amara went still. "I can't pay legal fees." "I know," Maya said. "I'm not asking you to." They met the next morning in Maya's office. Maya was in her late 30s, neat, sharp-eyed, and serious in a way that made false comfort impossible. She did not waste time pretending the case was simple. "Sonia's lawsuit is weak," she said after reviewing the papers with Amara. "But weak cases can still destroy poor people. That is the point. Rich people use legal pressure as punishment when truth embarrasses them." Amara sat across from her, listening. Maya folded her hands on the desk. "So let me be clear. This fight can be won." Amara's chest lifted slightly. Then Maya finished. "But it will be painful." There it was. Not soft words, not false hope, just truth. And for some reason, that made Amara trust her immediately. Maya went through the situation piece by piece. Sonia's attempt to paint the gala as defamation would not hold up easily if they could show evidence. But the legal pressure was real. The public attacks were part of the pressure. The aim was to frighten everyone into silence before the truth hardened into fact. Then Maya said something that changed the shape of the case. "We are not only defending you," she said. "We are going after her too." Amara looked up. Maya turned a page on her notepad and listed the angles. Fraud, false advertising, misuse of charitable claims, class action claims from people who paid for supposedly live performances. Amara stared at her. Until that moment, she had only thought in terms of surviving the attack. Maya was talking about answering it. By the time the meeting ended, Amara had signed representation papers with a hand that trembled only once. For the first time since the gala, she felt something unfamiliar. Not relief, but structure. She was no longer standing alone with a cloth in her hand while powerful people laughed. Now there was Daniel, who had spoken. Tunde, who had admitted the truth. Amaka, who had come forward with proof. Maya, who knew exactly what Sonia was trying to do and refused to be impressed by it. Now the poor cleaner was no longer standing alone. And then life struck again. 3 nights later, Dara's condition worsened. It began in the evening with stronger pain than usual, then nausea, then weakness that did not ease. By night, her breathing had changed, and her skin had taken on that frightening, tired look Amara had learned not to ignore. She rushed her to the hospital. The doctors moved quickly this time. Tests were repeated. A doctor spoke in a lower voice than before. Another ordered urgent monitoring. By the time dawn began to lighten the window, Amara had the answer she had feared. Time was running out much faster than they had thought. The treatment could not wait. It had to happen urgently. That night in the hospital, after Dara was finally resting, Amara sat alone in the corridor with her phone in her hand. The overhead lights were too white. The chairs were too hard. Somewhere down the hall, a woman was praying under her breath. A nurse passed with files pressed to her chest. The hospital air smelled of medicine, fear, and people trying not to break in public. Amara opened her phone. BC Adebayo's number was still there. Her thumb hovered over it. Just one call. That was all. One call, and Dara's treatment might be covered. One call, and the pressure could stop. One call, and perhaps this whole terrible thing would quiet down. For a moment, the truth felt too expensive. She lowered her head into her hands and closed her eyes. She was so tired. Tired of hospitals. Tired of counting money she did not have. Tired of pretending strength came naturally. Tired of choosing between right and necessary. She did not hear Dara wake. Not until a weak voice called her name. Amara. Amara lifted her head quickly and stood. Dara was awake, watching her from the bed with tired eyes. "You should be sleeping," Amara whispered. Dara gave a small, knowing look. "You were about to call her, weren't you?" Amara said nothing. For a second, her silence answered everything. Dara looked at the phone in her sister's hand, then back at her face. When she spoke, her voice was soft, but steady. "Fear is normal." Amara felt tears rise at once. Dara continued slowly because even speaking took strength. "But a lie bought with fear will poison both of us." The words settled into the room and stayed there. Amara stood frozen, the phone still in her hand. Dara reached for her fingers and held them weakly. "I don't want to live because you erased yourself," she said. "I don't want that kind of help." That was the moment Amara needed. Not because it made the fear disappear. It did not. But it reminded her what she was fighting to protect. Not only Dara's life, but Dara's dignity. Their mother had raised them to know that hunger, pain, and fear could bend a person, but they should not be allowed to buy the soul out of her. Amara switched off the screen and sat beside the bed. "I won't call her," she said. Dara nodded once and closed her eyes again. The first major hearing came 3 days later. By then, the courthouse was already crowded before the session even began. Journalists stood outside with cameras and microphones. Members of the public gathered on the steps. Some came because they cared about the scandal. Some came because they wanted to see Sonia Bello in legal trouble with their own eyes. Some came because the whole country now understood that this was no longer just about one singer and one cleaner. It was about power. Inside the courtroom, the air felt tight. Sonia sat at her table in a dark suit, polished and composed on the surface, but there was strain in her face now that no makeup could fully hide. Her legal team was large, expensive, sharp, used to pushing people around. Amara sat beside Maya in the only formal clothes she owned that still looked decent under pressure. She felt small when she entered. She felt the eyes on her. She felt the weight of Sonia's side of the room. But Maya leaned slightly toward her and said, "Do not be afraid of their numbers. Listen carefully. Answer only what matters." That helped. The hearing began. Sonia's lawyers tried first to frame Amara as reckless, emotional, and harmful. They spoke of damaged reputation, malicious statements, and career destruction. They tried to suggest that what happened at the gala was a bitter outburst, not truth. Then Maya stood. The room changed. She did not speak loudly. She did not need to. She laid things out with the cold order of someone building a wall brick by brick. First, the unedited gala footage. The courtroom watched Sonia call Amara out. Watched the humiliation. Watched the mockery. Watched the challenge. Then came the live threat. The recording of Sonia mentioning Dara's illness with open cruelty. That alone darkened the room. Then Maya presented Daniel's testimony. He explained how the pre-recorded vocal had been triggered over and over during performances. He spoke carefully, clearly, with dates and details. After that came Amaka's documents, the contracts, the payment records, the recording agreements, the silence clauses. Then Maya showed proof that Sonia's team had tried to silence truthful speech after the gala, including the cafe meeting, the prepared false statement, and the financial offer tied to Amara's silence. Bit by bit, the shape of Sonia's case began to collapse. The judge, a stern woman with a face that did not easily bend toward theatrics, looked increasingly unimpressed. Then she leaned forward slightly and looked straight at Sonia. "Let me ask you something directly," she said. The room went still. "Can you sing the note now?" Sonia blinked. Even her lawyers were caught off guard. The judge did not repeat herself at once. She simply waited. Sonia shifted in her seat. "Your lordship, that is not—" "It is very relevant," the judge said. "Can you sing the note now?" All eyes turned to Sonia. Amara could hear her own heartbeat. Sonia opened her mouth, then closed it. Her face tightened. "My voice is not warmed up," she said at last. The judge said nothing. The silence that followed was worse than an accusation. Everyone in the room heard it for what it was. Not caution. Not professionalism. Avoidance. Sonia tried again. "This is a courtroom, not a concert stage." But the damage had been done. That silence said more than any speech. The judge looked at the filings once more, then at Sonia's legal team. "What I see here," she said, "is not a sincere attempt to protect reputation. I see an attempt to intimidate and silence." Sonia's lawyers tried to respond, but the judge had already made up her mind. She denied Sonia's request to use the court to gag Amara and rebuked the filing as a misuse of legal process. The hearing was not the end of the case, but it was the turning point. Because once that happened, the whole country understood what kind of woman Sonia Bello really was. Not the elegant charity face, not the noble artist with tears in her eyes, but a woman who had built herself on borrowed voices, hidden harm, and the belief that poor people could always be frightened back into silence. After the hearing, the story spread even wider. What had started as a shocking clip from a charity gala now became a national scandal no one could ignore. News stations that had first covered it as entertainment began treating it like something bigger. It was no longer only about music. It was about fraud, power, cruelty, and the quiet way the sick had been used as decoration for wealth. 3 nights after the hearing, a major television program aired a full special on the case. They played the unedited gala footage. They showed Sonia calling Amara out in front of everyone. They showed the moment her voice failed without support. They played Daniel's confession. They aired Tunde Lawson's statement. They showed Amaka Naji's video and the documents she had posted. Then they spent the final part of the program on the charity side of the scandal. That was the part that hit hardest. People could forgive vanity more easily than they could forgive using suffering for profit. Many fans who might have defended lip-syncing as a performance choice grew quiet when they saw the patient images, the missing funds, the unclear spending, and the families who had waited for help that never truly came. By the next morning, the damage to Sonia's empire had become visible. Sponsors began dropping her. Her management team entered panic mode. Tour dates were suspended. Luxury brands that once rushed to be seen beside her started releasing short, careful statements about values, ethics, and distancing themselves from ongoing investigations. Industry bodies began quietly reviewing her awards and catalog. Music executives who had once praised her suddenly stopped answering questions. Some producers who had kept silent for years now pretended they had always had doubts. The same people who once protected her were beginning to step away from her like a burning house. Amara watched all this from a hospital chair and a small apartment with old curtains. She did not celebrate. She did not dance around with victory. She did not feel triumph the way gossip pages imagined she should. Mostly, she felt relief. Relief that truth had finally stopped being treated like madness. For years, she had lived in a world where powerful people could lie with perfect faces and poor people could be called unstable for noticing. Now, at last, what she had heard with her own ears and carried in silence was standing in the open where everyone could see it. That alone felt like breathing after a long time underwater. Then something else happened. Once the public saw Amara clearly, help began to come. At first it was messages. then calls, then public statements. Respected musicians began defending her openly. Not small names hungry for attention, but people whose voices carried weight. Veteran singers said what happened to her was wicked. Younger artists praised her courage. Producers admitted the industry had long protected the wrong people. One evening, Maya called Amara with news that made her sit down slowly before she could even respond. A music legend, an older man whose songs had shaped decades of lives, had quietly paid the urgent deposit for Dara's liver treatment. No press release, no performance, no camera, just payment. Amara held the phone to her ear and could not speak for a few seconds. The next day, another famous artist covered Dara's post-treatment recovery costs. Then a public fundraiser began moving across social media with a speed no one expected. It was not built around pity. It was built around outrage, love, and the sudden determination of strangers who had watched one woman be humiliated for telling the truth and decided they would not let her stand alone again. Within days, the amount passed what Amara had spent months trying and failing to gather. For the first time in years, she experienced something unfamiliar. Help without humiliation. Not pity, not performance. Not a hand stretched out so it could later remind her she had been beneath it. Real support. It mattered more than the money itself, because it proved something she had not dared believe. Truth had not destroyed her life. It had opened the door to the kind of help lies always promised but never truly gave. Dara's procedure was scheduled quickly after that. Everything became urgent at once. Forms had to be signed. More tests had to be completed. Blood had to be arranged. Doctors moved with the fast, serious focus of people who knew delay could cost a life. On the morning of the operation, Dara tried to smile for her sister. She was lying in the hospital bed in a loose gown, thinner than she used to be, but still holding herself with that same quiet courage that had become part of her nature. "Don't look like that," she whispered. Amara sat beside her and forced a small smile. Like what? Like someone already crying. That almost made Amara laugh, but her throat was too tight. She reached out and brushed Dara's hair back gently. "I'm allowed to be afraid." "I know," Dara said softly. "So am I." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Dara squeezed her hand weakly. "When I wake up, you'll be here." It was not a question. Amara nodded at once. "I'll be here." When the nurses finally came to wheel Dara away, Amara walked beside the bed until the doors that only staff could pass through stopped her. She stood there a long time after they disappeared, staring at the space where her sister had gone. Then the waiting began. It was long. Long in the cruel way hospital waiting always is. The clock moved, but not kindly. Every sound seemed too loud. Every silence felt dangerous. Every time a doctor or nurse appeared from the direction of the theater, Amara's whole body reacted before her mind did. She sat, stood, walked, prayed, sat again. During those hours, her mind moved through the whole shape of her life. She thought of her parents, her father's calm face, her mother's steady hands, the way grief had come into her life not as one blow but as a series of losses that had not stopped for years. She thought of the finale she had walked away from, the dress she had worn that night, the lights waiting for her, the future people said she had ruined. She thought of the years after that, when she learned to make herself smaller just to survive. The years of lowering her voice, lowering her eyes, lowering her needs. The years of pretending that not being seen hurt less than being seen and dismissed. And she thought with fresh pain of how close she had come to selling the truth just to survive. One signature, one lie, one moment of fear. That was all it would have taken. By the 6th hour, her body felt weak. By the 8th, she was barely aware of the people around her anymore. Then the doors opened. A doctor stepped out first, face tired, mask lowered. Amara stood so fast the chair behind her almost fell. For one terrible second, the doctor's expression looked unreadable. Then he smiled. The procedure was successful. That was all Amara needed to hear. She broke down completely, Not neatly, not quietly, not with the controlled tears she'd learned to hide in public. It all came out at once. Relief, grief, exhaustion of fear, memory, gratitude. Years of holding herself together seemed to loosen in one moment. Dara had survived. That was the emotional center of everything. Not the court case. Not the scandal. Not Sonia's fall. This, her sister, was alive. Much later, when Dara finally woke fully, Amara was seated by the bed with swollen eyes and a tired face she did not care to hide anymore. Dara turned her head slowly and looked at her. Amara leaned in at once. "I'm here." Dara's lips moved into the faintest smile. "You look worse than I feel." That time Amara laughed through her tears. Then she began singing the old hymn their mother used to sing at home. Softly. No show. No effort to sound impressive. Just love. As the melody moved through the room, something inside Amara seemed to settle into place. Not because the pain of the past disappeared. It did not. Her parents were still gone. The years lost were still lost. The humiliation had still happened. But for the first time, her voice no longer felt tied to fear. Not to judgment. Not to ambition. Not to survival alone. It felt whole. That was the moment her voice became whole again. Months passed. The legal fight continued moving in the background. But the shape of Amara's life had already begun to change. She no longer cleaned the auditorium. She no longer spent nights at the restaurant sink. Instead, she spent most of her time between Dara's recovery, meetings with Maya, vocal rest, interviews she handled carefully, and conversations with people from the music world who now wanted to know her. Many labels chased her. Some came with flattering words and glossy promises. Others came with contracts dressed up in kindness, but built around control. A few spoke as if they had discovered her themselves, as if she had not nearly been buried while they watched. Amara listened to them all. Then she refused most of them. She had learned too much to walk blindly into another pretty trap. She knew now that fame could smile while planning to own a person. She knew that polished language could hide ugly intentions. She knew that not every opportunity deserved to be touched. So when she finally signed, it was with a smaller label run by people who spoke less and listened more. They were not the biggest name in the room. They did not promise to build a brand out of her pain. They asked about Dara before they asked about release dates. They respected her need for a slower schedule. They gave her control over her music and made it clear that family would not be treated as an inconvenience. That was why she chose them. With their support, Amara began recording her first album. She called it Silent No More, and she did not make it alone. Amaka Naji worked with her closely from the beginning. That mattered deeply to Amara. The woman whose voice had once been hidden behind another person's fame now stood beside her openly, not as a secret weapon, but as a respected artist in her own right. The collaboration felt like healing in motion. Two women the industry had used in different ways, now making something honest together. The album was built around the things Amara had lived through. Truth, grief, dignity, courage, the cost of silence, the cost of speaking, the kind of faith people discover only when life leaves them with nowhere else to stand. She wrote songs that carried hospital corridors inside them, songs that held the ache of lost parents, songs that knew what it meant to be publicly misjudged and privately exhausted, songs that did not beg to be liked, only to be heard. When the album came out, people felt the difference immediately. It succeeded not because it was polished into emptiness, but because it was real. Listeners heard a woman who was no longer trying to sound perfect. They heard someone telling the truth from inside the wound and the healing both. And that kind of voice, once people really hear it, is very hard to forget. As time passed, Amara did not just become successful. She became useful. That mattered more to her than fame ever could. Success had come into her life in a strange way. It had not arrived when she was young and eager, standing under the lights of a talent competition. It had come after grief, after humiliation, after hospital corridors, after cleaning shifts, After the kind of years that leave a person with no illusion about how this world works. So when the money began to come, Amara did not treat it like decoration. She treated it like responsibility. She started a foundation and called it Unbroken Voices. The name came from everything she had seen, voices ignored because they came from poverty, voices used but not credited, voices frightened into silence by people with money, power, and influence. The foundation was built to support overlooked singers from poor backgrounds, backup singers, studio vocalists hidden behind famous names, and artists being pushed into unfair contracts they were too desperate to refuse. Amara made one promise from the beginning. No one under her system would be erased the way Amaka had been erased. No one would be buried the way she herself had been buried. The foundation did more than give grants. It paid for training, legal guidance, contract reviews, emergency support, and basic professional development for talented people who had always been told to be grateful for crumbs. It taught them how to protect their voices, their names, and their rights. A portion of Amara's music income went directly into that work. Another portion went into medical support for underprivileged people facing serious illness with little or no money, especially those whose families were already watching time run out. She never forgot how it felt to sit in a hospital with a number in your hand and a loved one's life on the other side of it. So now, whenever someone like Dara needed help, the answer would not always have to be humiliation, begging, or silence. That changed Amara deeply. Her voice was no longer only saving her own family. It was creating protection for others. That, more than public praise, made her feel that what she had suffered had not been wasted. Sonia Bello, meanwhile, kept trying to survive the scandal. For a while, she fought hard. Statements were released. A few loyal voices still defended her. Her team tried to reshape the story, soften the damage, and move attention elsewhere, but truth kept catching up with her. The class action grew. Refund claims increased. More financial questions came. Awards she once displayed with pride were pulled into review. Her reputation as a live singer collapsed completely. When she tried a stripped-down comeback built around the idea of honesty and the real Sonia, the public rejected it. The problem was no longer just whether she could sing or not. Trust had been broken. People no longer believed her tears, her explanations, or her reinvention. In the end, her public image became something sadder than dramatic. Not a queen destroyed in battle. Just a once powerful woman who had mistaken image for talent and cruelty for strength. Her fall was not the heart of the story, but it completed the justice. And the damage did not stop with Sonia alone. Because of the scandal, the Nigerian music industry was forced to change. It did not happen all at once, and it did not come from kindness. It came from embarrassment, pressure, and the fear of being the next name dragged into public disgrace. New performance rules began requiring clear disclosure when artists used pre-recorded lead vocals during live shows. Award submissions faced stricter credit transparency. Studio vocalists began receiving visible recognition. The old habit of hiding voices behind famous names became harder to maintain. What had once been buried in the fine print now had to be named. That mattered because Amara's fight had done something bigger than bringing down one woman. It had changed the system that protected her. About 18 months later, Amara returned to the same auditorium where she had once cleaned floors in silence. The building looked almost the same from the outside. The same entrance, the same polished surfaces, the same stage hidden behind walls and corridors. But to Amara, everything felt different because she was no longer entering from the back with a trolley and a cloth in her hand. She was entering as the artist headlining the night. Still, before going anywhere near the stage, she asked to stop by one place first. The cleaner's room. She opened the door and stood there quietly for a moment. The smell hit her first. Soap, mop water, old work, damp cloths, and the ordinary tired scent of labor no one claps for. It was such a familiar smell that it almost felt like stepping into another version of herself. Jude was there, sitting on a low stool, folding a rag with those slow, careful movements she knew so well. He looked up when she entered, and for a second he simply smiled. No dramatic speech, no fuss, just that smile. "You came," he said. Amara smiled back. Of course. Jude stood and looked at her the way proud older people do when words would only get in the way. "I knew that night would not be the end of you," he said. Amara laughed softly. "I did not know it myself." He nodded. "That's why God sends some people to see you before the world does." The words stayed with her, because they were true. Ordinary people had seen her before the world did. A tired old cleaner had called her back to herself on the night everything changed. A sick younger sister had reminded her not to sell the truth. A hidden studio singer had stood up and broken years of silence. Real help had come not from polished promises, but from people willing to act without using pain as decoration. When Amara finally made her way toward the stage area, she could already hear the audience settling in. This crowd was different from Sonia's crowd. It was not a room full of people buying status. It was full of ordinary Nigerians, workers, caregivers, teachers, cleaners, drivers, nurses, people who knew what it meant to be ignored until they became useful to someone richer. People who understood survival, dignity, and the pain of being looked down on. That made the night sweeter than any luxury event ever could have. When Amara stepped onto the stage, the applause that greeted her felt warm, not expensive. She looked out and did not see glittering indifference. She saw faces, real faces. People leaning forward not because they wanted to say they had attended something exclusive, but because they wanted to hear something true. Amara performed her own songs first. Songs from Silent No More. Songs about grief. Songs about survival. Songs about the long road back to oneself. She sang with the quiet confidence of someone no longer trying to prove she belonged there. That question had already been answered. Now she was simply giving people the truth she had fought to keep. The hall listened deeply. By the middle of the set, some people were wiping tears. Others sat still with that look people wear when a song has found a part of them they had kept hidden even from themselves. Then Amara paused and looked toward the side of the stage. "There is someone I want you to welcome tonight," she said. When Amaka Naji walked out, the applause rose instantly. This time, there was no secrecy around her, no hidden credit, no buried contribution. She walked out in full light, greeted by people who now knew exactly who she was. Amara looked at her, and both women smiled. Then together they began Rise Again. The song that had once been built on theft now belonged to the truth. The audience knew it. The singers knew it. The weight of that moment sat over the whole from the first note. They did not rush it. They did not perform it like revenge. They sang it like reclamation. And when the famous final praise lift came, both women rose into it fully live, fully honest, with no hidden track and no false support. The bright note opened over the hall with the kind of power that only truth can carry without shaking. The auditorium exploded. People stood, clapped, shouted. Some cried openly. Not because they were merely impressed, but because they understood what they had just witnessed. A stolen thing had been returned. A buried voice had been raised. A lie had been cleaned out of a song and replaced with honesty. When the applause finally softened, Amara lifted one hand gently. "There is one more person," she said. Then she turned toward the wings. Dara walked out slowly. The hall rose again before she even reached the center. She was healthier now, still touched by what she had survived, still slimmer than before, still carrying the memory of illness in the careful way she moved, but strong enough to stand tall beside her sister. Amara's face changed when she looked at her. All through the story of her own life, Dara had been there, not as a burden, never as a burden, but as the person whose life kept giving truth a human face. The two sisters stood side by side under the lights. Then together they sang the simple hymn their mother had loved. The song was not complicated. It did not need to be. It carried home inside it. It carried memory. It carried grief that had softened into gratitude. It carried the long road from loss to healing. And as the sisters' voices blended, something deeper than scandal, fame, or justice settled into the room. This was the true ending. Not revenge, not celebrity, not public humiliation turned around. Family restored through truth. When the final note faded, the hall was quiet for a few seconds before the applause came again, stronger than before. Amara stood there holding Dara's hand. Then she looked out at the crowd one last time. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm and clear. There are many people in this world whose gifts are ignored because they are poor, quiet, unknown, or easy to push aside, she said. I know what it means to be one of them. I know what it means to be told in different ways that your voice does not matter. She paused. But no honest voice should ever be forced into silence again. The room answered her with thunder.